So welcome, Melinda Thingpen. I just mixed your first name and last name together. But
that took me.
yeah, so my experience with you and the way I met you was through home birth, and my wife is a nurse, labor and delivery nurse. It was at Wesley. She was in a clinic, and that clinic is that nurse practitioner moved on, and she's now at home, thankfully, with our children. And I was just blown away. I've always been interested in home birth. I've kind of, I guess you could say, fantasized about it because I'm not a fan of hospitals. No offense to them. I don't have
Yep.
you know, I just don't have a preference for going to a sick place. I know it's a little exception with babies
Right.
and all, but there's just a lot of things in there that's different. So I was really impressed with you. I was so glad my wife found someone that was data based and knew the
Mhm.
data and the what actually goes on and what doesn't, and you don't have this what happens a lot in the alternative community, which are quote unquote is going to be your opinion or your bias or whatever that may be. You give me more data
Right.
than I could have looked up 1,000 times, and I'm really grateful for that with from a midwife perspective, because if you did have, and a lot of people do have, like, oh, I couldn't do it, you calmed all that down, even if there was
Right.
a possibility. And my wife was fully confident, and I was too, that we could do it, no problem. But
Mhm.
I mean,
Mhm.
you
Mhm.
constantly give me great data that I didn't even ask for. And, that whole process really made me realize that I had a health coaching client tell me she's home birthed 6 kids. And she told me all I need
Wow.
is my body and time, and I can do it. And, that encouraged
Mhm.
me.
Mhm.
And I
Mhm.
just, the experience with you is from way before we were even into second and third trimester. You helped us with, my wife had a rough pregnancy in the
Right.
beginning, and then the second one with you, it was way better. I mean, she puked 10 times a day in the first one. The second one, she
Mhm.
may have puked 10 times total. So you really helped us a lot
Mhm.
with what to eat and when to eat and how much. And that was very
Mhm.
bio individual to my wife and her problem. And I mean, we had a child that had 2 pounds more, and she went full term, and we didn't go 16 hours of labor.
Mhm.
It was 4
Mhm.
hours. And I attribute a lot of what you taught us and my wife following along what you're saying. And, that was exciting. So why I brought you on here today was so I could share with my audience the family wellness aspect of it, but also from
Mhm.
birth to conception. I have a book I want to write that I'm building the outline on
Nice.
right now. And it's simply that, from birth to
Mhm.
conception, what we can do moving forward from here to change the world, because we kind of got the hand we dealt, and you can't change that. But you
Right.
can,
Right.
you can't change what you're dealt, but you can change what you have from here forward. You can improve on it, epigenetically speaking, and in
Right.
every other way. And I'm a living testament of that. My children don't suffer what I suffer from, so hopefully. But you know
Right.
um I got to have you on here so I can share a data based scientific midwife that can quell a lot of the people's problems with that, and really enjoy the process, because I did. I mean, that was the most fun and the most
Yeah.
relaxed, calm. I mean, I can't say enough about it, really. So I want
Yeah.
to know, really, I want to get a background
Yeah.
first and go back to the beginning. Like, I want to know about your childhood, your health, and you
Right.
definitely told me, and I was excited to hear all that. And then I want to just get you to tell me what it's been like up until now and your experiences, anything you want to share,
Mhm.
and then we'll go
Mhm.
from there.
All right, great. So, just to kind of repeat a little bit of what you said, my name is Melinda, and I was actually born and raised in California. So, I tend to talk kind of fast. So, if I need to slow down, just flag me
Okay.
down. Yeah, so I was the first child, actually ended up being the first of 12. But of course, at the time, my parents had no clue that they were going to have that many. But I was the first child, and was born just a little bit early, not crazy early, but just early enough that my mom's doctor was out of town at the time of my birth. And so she ended up with the on-call doctor, who she absolutely did not appreciate, did not like. And what nobody knew at the time was that I was born with a very rare genetic abnormality, congenital abnormality called jejunal atresia with apple peel syndrome. And basically, in a nutshell, what that means is that my upper and lower intestines were not connected, and my lower intestine had never developed. So if you know the apple peeler thing that people use and how it gets that peel off the apple all corkscrewed looking, that's what my lower intestines look like. And I don't have mesentery at all, which a lot of people find amazing, but I have surgical notes to prove that is the case. And that basically means that I am missing a huge part of my blood supply to my intestines. And so gut health has always been something that, I have had to deal with. I had major abdominal surgery when I was about 25 hours old. And at the time, I was the 9th case in the world to have had it and to have lived through the process of it. And God was good, and all the steps were orchestrated, and the people that needed to be there were the people that were there, and that's why I lived. So I grew up pretty much with a normal life. We had a typical American diet and had no known reactions to anything, really. I mean, people were always surprised to know that there was anything different or wrong. And that's basically how it has been. I've only had one episode of difficulty from it, outside of, having to really focus on making sure that I was spending a lot of time building my good gut flora and discouraging the overgrowth of candida and yeast issues. So like I said, I'm the oldest of 12, and the younger half or so were born at home. And so I was 14 when my mom had her first home birth, and I was able to be involved in that process. And that's from when I knew I wanted to be midwife. So from that point on, I aimed for that, and started training in 1999, graduated, and became a midwife in 2005, and have been working at this ever since. So my philosophy is pretty simple. I believe that childbirth should be a natural event that occasionally needs medical help, rather than a medical event that occasionally happens naturally. And I work very hard to educate my clients and their families. And, I know you mentioned a little bit at the beginning as well, but I'm a firm believer of informed consent. And without me presenting you with all of the benefits, risks, alternatives, I'm the one calling the shots, and that's not how it's supposed to be. I need to present you with that information and give you the information that you need and that your wife would need to make an informed choice, and then guide you in that and support you in that as well. And so that's kind of where I'm at.
Awesome. Yeah, that's all. I didn't know some of that. I mean, I've heard a lot of your story, but I didn't know some of that. That's amazing. Yeah, and it's amazing that you lived and went through that. So
it is, yeah.
So my next question really is, like I said, I want that book, and you're a great resource. What are your thoughts and your preparation and your experience with people that are trying to conceive? I know you've experienced some people that trying, and what would be nutritionally, lifestyle, or your biggest recommendations for someone preparing for conception?
Sure. So I always suggest that moms and dads, but that is planned at least 3 to 6 months in advance, and that you spend at least. I like things in a box, and I like time frames. I'm a big calendar girl, and so 12 weeks are like every 12 weeks I sit down and we rework our family's goals and nutrition and all that. And so that 12-week mark prior to pregnancy, I think, is just as important as the next 3 trimesters of the pregnancy. So those first 3 months, as you're leading into a preparation to conceive, you're wanting to focus on nutrition and setting a foundation for nutrition. If you have a history of hyperemesis or anything like that in past pregnancies, then I recommend adding in some dandelion, either in tea or capsule form, just as a liver cleanse to kind of help prepare, so that hopefully toxins are flushed out prior to the pregnancy, and that hopefully we have a slightly better start to the pregnancy. There's a book that I recommend, and it's by a lady named Rebecca Felt, and it's called "It Starts with the Egg." And it's a fantastic resource for people who are looking into conception. And I have had amazing results with it, sharing it with families who have struggled with first trimester losses. So maybe they weren't having difficulty conceiving, but maybe we had, a history of an early trimester loss. And we know that early trimester losses a lot of times are tied back to chromosome and, issues with the egg or the sperm. And so the book has fantastic information and resources for both the man and the woman. And it deals a lot with environmental factors as well. So, the toxins in plastics and other common household products that we don't necessarily take time to focus on. Nutrition wise, my favorite recommendation for nutrition is the book that is Nourishing Traditions. I think that that's a fantastic resource. It's a very thick book. And so, not everybody is going to take the time to read that. But in a nutshell, basically what we're looking at is, did it grow on a tree, or was it live? And basically focusing on, cutting out those, artificial additives, colors, preservatives, those kinds of things, and just focusing on good nutrition, not just for the health of the egg and the sperm, but also then for the health of mom going into the pregnancy, so that she is not, again, her liver is not working overtime trying to detoxify and making her really, really sick at the beginning of her pregnancy. So I've had good instances with the dandelion with moms that have a history of maybe even hospitalizations during first trimester because they, needed an IV because they were not able to hold anything down. I have a mom who recently came to see me, and she had lost 20 pounds already in the first several weeks of her pregnancy. And, it took us a while to find a form of dandelion that she was able to actually keep down and ingest. And for her, it was the hot tea. And it turned it around. It really did. And kept her out of a hospital situation. So those are always really good tools to have. But that's a fantastic book. And, I highly recommend it.
Great. Yeah, that's amazing. My first pregnancy, well, my wife's first pregnancy, I wasn't, but it was like, ooh, she was puking 10 times a day, and we tried everything, but we didn't try dandelion root, and we didn't have you at that time. And I'm glad we had you the second time and didn't need it as much. But so the next question is, once you get into conception and you're in your first trimester, second trimester, when do you start, or what's your recommendations of, like, I'm big on nutrition because I believe it's a lot to do with it. And, I love the exercise component. And one thing that's important to me is the way you set it up. So what's your general recommendations and anything that pops in your mind that, you've had great success fixing problems?
So nutrition wise in pregnancy, the goal is at least 80 grams of protein a day. And that may sound overwhelming for somebody who's not used to either tracking their protein or who is used to living on cereal and pasta. But it's actually really easy when you come down to it and you sit down and you look at it. And so again, those couple of weeks leading into a possible conception, and then again, from that point on, the goal would be to try and track that daily intake. And what you'll find is that there's a huge difference in moms who eat for two and, end up gaining 80 pounds on donuts and, Captain Crunch, versus the moms who have that solid nutrition, and they're still going to gain weight. We want weight gain in pregnancy. So not gaining weight is not the goal, but if it's put on through a very nutritious, Whole30 type approach where we're doing, proteins, in the form of meats and dairy and nuts and, good, healthy fats and whole grains. We don't want to exclude food groups that were created, but we do want to make sure that we're getting them in the closest form to their original source as possible, so soaking grains and that kind of thing. And then for exercise, I like to see at least 1 mile. My goal is at least 1 mile per trimester. So that doesn't mean you just walk 1 mile and 3 miles total through the pregnancy. But it means that in first trimester, I want you walking at least 1 mile a day. And in second trimester, I want you walking at least 2 miles a day. And in third trimester, I want you walking at least 3 miles a day. Now, if you're already walking 3 miles a day going into the pregnancy, then keep it up, don't back down to that 1 mile. But the reality is, the sad reality is a lot of us are not in a pattern of continuous regular exercise. And so we want to start off with baby steps and make sure that the steps that we're putting in place are sustainable and achievable. Gotcha. And then as far as other exercise, of course, I'm a huge proponent of other exercises as well. And some of those need to be tailored more individually, which I know you're aware, that's kind of right up your alley there. But yeah, and in the first trimester, it's going to be hard. A lot of times it's going to be hard. But getting out, even, generally a slow, easy walk is going to be about 20, 30 minutes to a mile. Right. And that amount of time out in the sunshine, we're increasing vitamin D levels, that is releasing endorphins, that is making mom feel better overall. And I remember during some of my sickest pregnancies, which I have 4 children, but some of my sickest pregnancies where I felt like I cannot even get off this couch. And I would make myself get up and walk around, and I wasn't running a marathon. I wouldn't have won any awards for the speed, but just getting out there and making the loop and then coming back in and realizing I feel a little better. There's something about being out in the sunshine. So there's a lot that builds into that. There are a lot of ripple effects of exercise as well as nutrition.
No doubt. Yep. So whenever you have you have a course right in the middle of it, it's like a day where we came and we sat down and you taught us that course. That course helped me tremendously because, there was things that questions you answered that I didn't know I had. And then there was a lot of questions that I had that you answered without me even asking. And, I really love the fact that knowledge is your base. So when you share that day, just give me like a short overview, because we spent hours there with you, probably 6 hours.
Yeah.
Good.
It was. So basically, the name of the course is Birth Emergencies and Complications course. And the premise is that, again, we want that informed consent, right? We don't want to wait until we're in the middle of an emergency for me to sit down and say, hey, you know what? You're bleeding more than I'd like to see. We have A, B, or C as possibilities. It's just, I want you to open your mouth. I'm going to throw some herbs in there and, go from there. So by talking through these possible scenarios 4, 6, 8, even 12 weeks before a baby is due, that gives the couple then a time to go home and to talk about things among themselves. Like you said, it might bring up questions that you didn't even know you had. And then it gives them, time to come back to me and ask those questions and me to present more information if necessary. And so by the time the day of birth rolls around, everybody's on the same page. And hopefully everybody's mind is even more at ease. And so I tell people all the time, I get in the car anytime, day or night, and I travel all over the state, lots of little back country roads. And when I leave my house, I never think, oh my, I hope I don't have a flat tire while I'm out and about. Because realistically, if I do this long enough, at some point I probably will end up with a flat tire. But I have a husband who takes a lot of time making sure that my tires are rotated and in good shape. And just like we do during pregnancy, doing, hour-long appointments, not just the little 5 minutes in and out, but we're spending a solid hour every single appointment with these moms, and most of the time with dad there as well. Focusing on nutrition and all the things that we need to keep a mom low risk. So we know that. And then we know, I know I have a spare tire in my vehicle. So if I did have a flat, I have a spare tire. I can pull it out, put it on, and keep on going. And the class that's the purpose of the class, is just to let people know, we know that these moms are low risk because I have a very thorough risk screening system that I have put in place.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, we know that sometimes things can come up that are unexpected. But we have a plan, and we're going to talk about the plan ahead of time. And then we're going to fold that plan up. We're going to put it in our back pocket, and we'll probably never think about it again.
Right.
But that just lets people know, during the birth, we're not over there sitting in the corner trying to Google things or thinking, oh, I hope she stays low risk, because I don't know what I would do. So basically, we start off the class and we talk about normal labor and birth. We talk about, what supplies to have on hand, and how to set your home up for the birth, how to get in touch with your midwife, when to call your midwife, what to do in early labor, conserving energy and resting and nutrition, preparing for the big event. And then we move from there and we talk about variations of normal. So these are things that aren't going to change the ultimate birth plan, but they might take us on a detour. So we're looking at things like going significantly past your due date, or your water breaking before you're in active labor. Yeah. And then we move from there and we talk about complications. And so complications are things that they're not emergencies, but they do have that potential to kind of catapult us into a more emergent situation. So we're looking at things like shoulder dystocia or meconium in the water, pregnancy-induced hypertension, those kind of things. And then we move from there and we talk about the true emergencies, which, bottom line, no matter what got us to that point, we're looking at a mom who's bleeding too much or a baby who's not breathing the way the baby should breathe at birth. And we take time and we break it down. And for every topic and every scenario in each category, we talk about, well, what is it? How common is it? Is there anything that can be done to prevent it? Yeah. And then if it happens, how serious is it? And how would it be handled at home versus how would it be handled in a hospital? And so, like you said, we take about 6 hours and go through that. And sometimes it's longer, with people asking questions as we go along. But we spend a lot of time focusing on that, because that's one of the things with home birth. I think as a nation and as a people group, we're so programmed to think that we just go and the doctor tells us what to do, and we kind of bow and say, okay. And we do that. And we don't stop to ask questions or to really think for ourselves. And, everybody has seen the little meme floating around, well, don't confuse your Google search with my doctor degree,
Yeah, you're right.
But the goal for me is that you need to be an active participant. Your wife needs to be an active participant. These are care decisions that we reach together. Yeah. And that is what gives informed consent. I can't just shove a paper at you, like they do. I had a mom recently who ended up with a C-section, and they just kind of shove a paper in her face and were like, okay, we need you to sign this for a C-section. They don't go over the risks, and they don't say, well, this is major abdominal surgery, and this is right. Your risk, the average blood loss for a C-section is twice as much as it is for a vaginal birth, and risk of surgical injuries and so forth. And I'm not knocking C-sections. This C-section was necessary. I'm thankful that there are C-sections, and I'd be the first to take a lady in for one if I felt like it was needed. But that's a procedure that is done every day for reasons that are not medically necessary. Right. And so, that's what's so important to me, is to sit down with you face to face and to say, here is the data. Here is so Group B strep, for example. In a hospital situation, any mom who tests positive for Group B strep is given antibiotics in labor. Well, we know what antibiotics does to the gut. Yeah. And we know what antibiotics then, will go from mom to baby, because that's the goal. We're not treating the mom, we're treating the baby. Yeah. And then we have babies that are being born with no gut flora. And they're little and they're tiny and they're vulnerable and susceptible, and they have no gut flora. That they don't have anything to start off with. And there was a study done, and I need to go back and find it. And once I do, I'll send it to you. But there was a study done that tracked the implementation of routine antibiotics in labor with an increased incidence, the rise of E. coli in newborns. And so, I have a mom who ended up with antibiotics in labor, and her baby was very sick and in the hospital for a very long time with E. coli because he had no gut flora.
Right.
But anyway, so we take something like Group B strep, and we know that for that one baby that gets it, it's very, very bad, and it's very, very significant. But
right.
there's only a 1 to 2% chance of that baby getting sick, which means that there's a lot of babies and mamas who are getting antibiotics
that don't need it.
That don't need it. And so to present the numbers and to say this is the number of moms who would have been given antibiotics unnecessarily to prevent this one, or this is the number of moms who have to be induced at 39 weeks to prevent this one bad outcome from going past a due date, and just presenting that data and that information in concrete, real numbers. So for example, for Group B strep, a doctor that I really admire and really appreciate very, very much, both as a doctor that I have sought care from, and then as a doctor that I have sent clients to, he would say, Group B strep, you have a higher chance statistically of being in a car wreck on your way to the hospital for antibiotics than you do of your baby actually getting sick because you declined the antibiotics. But you don't hear that from people. You hear this is just standard procedure. And so I think that's what I'm most passionate about, is just giving that information. And then if I have a family that looks at me and says, Melinda, that 1% is not something we're willing to take.
Yeah, because the collateral damage.
Well, then I come along. Right. Then I come alongside of them and I help them find the care that they need, that's going to make them the most comfortable. Yep. So it's not me just, trying to force people into doing things my way. And for the record, I've had all 4 of my babies in a hospital because of the congenital issues that I was born with, and not knowing, because there was so few that had been born with it, and we weren't able to find any data on how that, could affect childbirth. And so I've had 4 perfectly normal, natural, straightforward hospital births, came home a few hours later. But so I'm not just a slam the door at the hospital, either. Yeah. But I think the informed consent is what it comes down to.
You're right.
So.
And one thing that's really, I want to go back, and I didn't even cover that, but you triggered my memory. The accountability of sitting down and looking at, in this situation, your medical provider, when mom sits across from you and looks at you and you ask these questions, and you have a lot, and you chart the entire time that you're there. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's a full workup, and there's accountability. And I think the best that I've seen to keep that low risk is the accountability, because you are correct along the way, and you have data at every visit.
Yes.
And you ask them to track. And then once they realize, like, okay, I've had to talk to somebody, and really the most important things that I've learned is it's the questions you ask, not, I got 4 or 5 questions here. How you feeling? You feeling fine? Okay. Have a nice day. And it's not 15-minute session. I mean, in an hour, mom's going to open up and she's going to be like, hey, I'm struggling with this, and this happened, and that happened. And once all that comes out and you document it, then you can work with it. But people don't open up in 15 minutes, especially somebody. No. And if you can sense if somebody's in a hurry, and you're not per se just got all the time in the world. I mean, we were walking in and somebody was walking out, and whenever we were walking out, somebody was walking in just about every time.
Yeah.
But you structured it in a way that, kept her low risk, did everything you needed to do. You were balanced in your approach. And, I was amazed to see my wife, like, she had a meat aversion in the first pregnancy. It was a little bit there, but you helped her a whole lot by being able to, try this, try that, eat this, do it this way, do it that way. But the most important was your accountability. Like, you sitting there talking to her, relating to her.
Every single visit, we're going to talk about how are you eating? Have you exercised? How is your fluid intake? How is your sleep? Are you getting enough sleep? And there is that we know statistically from the birth certificate data that is out there and from in the states that require midwives to report data yearly and stats, we know that home birth is safe for low risk moms. And we know that moms are low risk about 96% of the time. So but one of the things that's important to me is spending that time to make sure every visit, like you said, we don't wait until we have a train wreck.
Yeah.
You know, we try to do the little tune-ups along the way,
right.
As we can, and as the need arises, so that you know, I have a risk scoring system where there are certain things in this column, and those are risk factors of 1. You know, and there are certain things in this column, and these are risk factors of 2. And over here we have risk factors of 3. And so if a mom gets a risk factor of 3, then we automatically refer out, and a lot of times end up having to transfer her out. But it doesn't matter if it's 1 risk factor of 3 or if it's 3 risk factors of 1. And a lot of times those 1 risk factors, they're the ones that add up and get us out of the home birth situation. So those are things like mom's diet and her exercise and that kind of thing. And so I do spend a lot of time focusing on it. And I will say that this year with COVID, I've had a lot of calls, a lot of people I've had to turn away. The first 2 weeks after the initial lockdown back in March, I turned 60 something moms away, who were all due within the next 2 to 3 weeks, and who all were panicking and not wanting to go to a hospital last minute. And I had to tell them, you know, 1, I'm full and I can't take you. But then 2, it really comes down to mindset and lifestyle. Right. And you don't need to be deciding this at 38 weeks. You need to decide it at that 4, 5, 6, 8 week mark, or even ideally, like we talked about, you know, 2, 3, 4, 6 months prior to conception even, and have that plan in place of mindset of good nutrition. And this year I have had, so since 2015, or I'm sorry, 2005, when I started practicing, from then until this year, I have had only 2 cases of pregnancy-induced hypertension or toxemia, preeclampsia, whatever, you know, in that whole hypertensive, just 2. And this year with COVID, I had 3 in 1 month. Wow. And what it came down to were all 3 of them were moms that had transferred to me late in care, where we only had, you know, most of the time I think with all 3 of them, they transferred in around that 28 to 30 week mark. And we didn't have all that time. And so by the time we had our initial visit and I sent them home with the handouts on nutrition, and then they came back with their 1 week diet chart, and then we made corrections and sent them home with that. And then they came back. We were always 1 step behind, and we couldn't catch up, you know? And so, it is hard to catch up, and, you know, that's not blaming them. That's not blaming me. That's just the facts that, you know, if we wait until a mom is in her 3rd trimester, there are some things that we can do, but there's a lot that we can't do. And so again, going back to those preconception weeks and then 1st trimester weeks and 2nd trimester, every choice that is made nutritionally at the front end like that is a choice that's going to help keep us hopefully out of a hospital situation towards the end, because we're not, you know, I had one mom, bless her heart, she was in labor, and I showed up in labor, and her blood pressure was through the roof, and she had protein in her urine. And I had to sit there and look at her and say, I know you're in labor, you know, you've made it to 41 weeks, you're in labor, and you are, you know, almost 4 centimeters dilated, but unfortunately, I'm going to have to call it, and you're going to have to go to a hospital. And it broke my heart, you know, but they would be the first to admit, we've talked about it, you know, several times since then, they would be the first to admit they came into care late. And it wasn't that they did anything wrong. It's just, we didn't have that hour, you know, on average, we have 12 1-hour visits on average with a mom. If a mom comes in early in 1st trimester and then has a baby right at term, we have 12 1-hour visits. That's 12 hours that we have to sit there and spend face to face. And so, a lot of times people look at the end result and they think, oh, well, that mom, had a perfect pregnancy, or she had a bad pregnancy or whatever. And they're not looking at the little choices along the way
Yeah.
that get us there, good or bad, that are what
Mm.
get us there. So
Yeah, one thing that I want to say that all moms and dads should be clearly saying to themselves, not to put blame here or there, but to own what you have and what you've done and what you haven't
yeah,
done, and not get it mixed up or get frustrated at the situation, because that don't help the stress or anything of that nature. And we can't get mad if we haven't done the work or we haven't done the discovery.
right,
I have
right.
recently, in the last year, I've transformed my health coaching into more genomic, lab-based, data-driven, you know,
Mhm.
coaching, because I've got the nutrition, and that's a great start. Eat whole foods and those
Yeah,
things. And then I found that once we tested my wife's stool in between pregnancies, once we tested her blood work and her Dutch test for
yeah,
hormone, that's when we were able
yeah.
to work with a nurse practitioner and get as much preparation between pregnancies to get it going. You can't really do
Yes.
much during a pregnancy because of detox and you
Right.
lose the baby. But,
It's hard.
when you're honest with yourself and saying, hey, the first pregnancy gave me a little indication that I didn't have my act
Yep.
together. And it's not to be,
Yep.
negative or, self-judging or anything. It's just to say, okay, we got data. Now we need to act on it and move forward.
Right.
And that's the same way with postpartum. Once you get, into the 6 months of
Yes.
breastfeeding, you can really, you
Mm.
know, do things to help mom a lot and help the baby as well with
Mhm.
her nutrition. And, even like I went as far as to say that you can do probiotic baths with, to help the vaginal flora, so the baby gets a great flora whenever she comes out.
Mhm.
And if mom's
Yeah.
gut health is great, then,
Mhm.
and her vaginal flora is great,
Baby's
then
off to
yeah.
the start.
And that's a great start. And my daughter is, I mean, it's night and day. My son's great health, everything's good. But like my daughter's digesting and breaking things down early in,
Mhm.
per se, that my son didn't. I mean, grape skins and
Yeah.
things of that nature, they just pass through whole. My daughter's digesting
Uh-huh.
things that, I'm just blown away in her
Right.
resilience and her wellness
Uh-huh.
and her like ability to handle pain and
Mhm.
frustration and things of that nature. Her like she stood up at right at 7 months, and by 8 months she's walking, and she's
Wow.
been running ever since. And I know that
Yeah.
varies here and there, but a good nutrition based, what mom's eating, but changing
Mhm.
the flora and getting good flora. 70% of our serotonin is made in our gut by
Right.
bacteria, good probiotics. And if we don't have that, then we're not going to make it. And,
Right.
there's little minor things we pick up on all our children, but I see
Mhm.
a massive difference in her. And, deep nutrition, Dr. Catherine, she, I don't remember her last name, but
Mm.
she wrote a good
Yes.
book, and she said normally there's a slight degradation in the nutrients, of course, from mom when she has a baby. But as children get older, you have a step down every 2 years, 3 years, or sometimes closer, and
Right.
the next child don't get as good of nutrition.
As much.
Yeah. And that was just, an eye opening experience to me. And I was thinking, okay, what can I do right now before we conceive
Right.
to give my daughter, everything we can give her before we get in that conception stage, and make sure
Right.
through pregnancy we don't repeat our last mistakes and we make new ones. And, we
Yep.
keep going in the process of setting her up for the best we could. And I mean, I did.
Right.
I had to do some extensive things for my gut health, which had nothing to do with my wife. But I took what I learned and put it in a probiotic bath for her to make sure she had the best that I could give her probiotics. So my daughter came through, she
Mhm.
had a great establishment of flora, and then, great breast milk. She's been on breast milk for 2 years, or a year, I'm
Right.
sorry. And we'll definitely
Yeah.
continue into the second year. And we're doing things to
Mhm.
help mom as well. And, people need to know that pregnancy has a price and birth has a
Right.
price, and it takes a lot out of a woman, and every man and woman needs to know that and really address that, and care for her and treat her a little different in
Mhm.
good ways, And we don't. Sometimes men and women just expect pump a baby out every year or so, and that is kind of, that's hurt us. And the one thing, I was born C-section, and I've had IBS my whole life, and I've learned that my mom's mistakes I paid the price for, and our children shouldn't pay the price for our mistakes. They're due, and that's part of it. But with you, we were in a very great environment in our home. We had a water birth in our home. It was fantastic. The stress was really low. Yeah, we had a post, I guess you would consider that immediate postpartum injury from birth. And we did go to the hospital, and you didn't have to, but you accompanied us there, and you stood there and you helped us, make the best decisions, and you laid out options on the table instead of traditional medicine where I need you to do this, 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 and this, and you just sign over and go. And your process was, you were a advocate for us, but you were not dictating us or pushing us one way or the other. You just laid facts out, and you battled that battle very well. And I mean, you didn't have to go to the hospital with us, but you took that upon yourself. And I think every midwife, if they listen to this, or someone talking to their midwife, need to know that she can definitely help you a lot in that situation. And it's way more than a doula.
Right.
I think doulas are great, but whenever you have that medical background, and you've been through that whole process, and that data, then you can talk to a doctor, and you can not disrespect the doctor, but intervene in the right places where mom's just trying to have a baby. She's not trying to fight a doctor.
Right.
And I'm not vilifying doctors. Right. I'm more vilifying the education, because the education can be very surgical. And, there's a lot of good doctors out there, and they're great surgeons, but it shouldn't be approached surgically first. I think it should be approached naturally, like you do. That's especially why I want people to hear, your way, your story, but some of my experience. And I've talked to other, moms that have, used you, and it's been incredible results compared to other births. And, that I think everybody needs to hear that, and hear that option. And especially now, whenever, 60 families, 60 parents realize that, not that they messed up, but they didn't prepare for what they were getting into. They bit off more than they could chew. Right. And then they had to, be scared, and that helps nobody. And, that right there is
exactly.
It's pretty eye-opening.
You need to go into your birth feeling like you can trust the people that are there.
Right.
And feeling like that they've got your backs. Yep. And that they're going to be honest with you about information, and that they're going to support you in the decisions that you make. And you don't need to go into your birth feeling like you're having to fight for every little thing. And I think that's what's sad, is that, there was somebody put out a little meme earlier in the month, and I saved it, but I didn't reshare it. But it said, Mississippi has one of the highest infant mortality rates in the country. And it's not because 1.8% of moms are birthing at home. So,
that's no doubt right.
That says a lot.
Yep.
And I know that, a doctor who is seeing hundreds of people a day, even, or, in the course of their practice, or a doctor who's in a group practice. And so you may not see the same doctor more than once or twice during the pregnancy, or you do have a doctor, and this is what's really sad to me, is you have a doctor that you really trust and respect, and you feel like, we have a plan, and they're going to honor this plan. And then you get to the hospital, and your doctor's not on call, and you end up with a grouch who can't stand your birth plan, and everything goes out the window. And so I think that continuity of care is really important. And the time spent in care is really important, and developing that relationship, and by the end of the pregnancy, I know what your dog's names are, and I know what your child's birthday theme was, and we and vice versa. You know things about me, and we develop that relationship so that when I look at you in labor and I say, I am so sorry, but I think we need to go in. You know, we've reached a point where we need to go in. They respond and they say, okay. And we trust that because we've made those decisions, or vice versa. When I look at a dad and I say, this is normal, this is okay, I see him take a breath.
Mm-hmm.
He knows he can trust that because we've built that relationship up over time. So, you know, I think it's a whole cycle. It's a cycle of, you know, the cycle of life is the preconception and then the pregnancy and then the postpartum, and spending time postpartum with nutritional counseling and guidance and helping moms build their own bodies through nutrition and through exercise and through supplementation as needed, so that they're not going into a subsequent pregnancy depleted, right? We're setting that foundation. You know, when we do that 6 to 8 week postpartum visit, that's one of the things that we talk about. If I have a family that says, well, we are, you know, not planning to do anything for birth control, we're open to having whatever children come in whatever time frame that they come, I support that 100%. Now let's talk about nutrition, and let's talk about you know, how creative ways for mom to be getting extra rest, and let's talk about maybe some vitamins and supplements so that we know that mom is going into a potential, you know, a subsequent pregnancy, you know, with the best possible foundation. And, you know, because I have a lot of moms who are still breastfeeding when they get get pregnant. And so if we waited until, oh, well, call me when you're done breastfeeding, we'll talk about things, you know, that doesn't work. We need to constantly be pouring into those moms so then they are able to bear the children and nurture the children without suffering themselves, you know, without causing detrimental health problems for themselves.
That's right. And whenever I say there's a price, like, it's not that it's a price and you just take a loss. I mean, you just got to put that amount in there. And like you said, you got to put the right nutrition in and, you know, support a baby nursing and being pregnant. And people need to really realize, and I know women do it extremely well, and they're way stronger than a man and way tougher. And I mean, in that regards, in most regards, women are superior in that way. We all each have our place, but, you know, we overestimate what our body does naturally, and we undergive. We underestimate the power of nutrition and the power of it. And then we look up and you see moms with hair falling out, you know, bone loss, massive bone loss, and there's density problems and, you know, broken bones or whatever it may be. And that all could have been avoided, and you still could have supported your children. And then, you know, you don't have a rough subsequent birth, or you don't just weak and tired all the time, and you're vibrant. And we want you to enjoy your life and enjoy the pregnancy, because those are some amazing hormones. So you really answered my last question, was with postpartum care. I mean, we had a great you have an assistant there. She's a registered nurse. She did a great job. She came out, she went above and beyond on, you know, what she's giving. We got a bath and all kind of like tea to drink, and, you know, that really helped a lot, because you
oils, herbs.
And, you know, you were her midwife for her birth. So we had like like you said, the continuity of care, but also experience care, not just, you know, I'm trained in this. No, I've been through this and I know what it feels like. And, you know, that helps a lot, because there's a lot of male, not say a lot, there's probably too many male labor and delivery doctors out there that don't know what it's like. And they're very good surgeons, and they're very good natural delivery. I know several in the area, and they're great people, great doctors. But I do believe in the power of relating. You know, if you've been through birth and all, you know more about it, and you've experienced it better. You know, and I'm very involved in my wife's births. I mean, I held her up for over an hour through the first one. I supported her in the tub or the pool the second time, and I'll always be there. but it's minimal compared to what she does. And
Mhm.
that whole postpartum care was incredible. That y'all came
Yeah.
out and you talk and you get data, you weigh the child, you go through the registration of birth and all that, and you know
Mhm.
you give equal if not better care, and you're always aware of emergencies that can happen, and you stay really close, and you respected our
Mhm.
time together, and you were very calm. And my wife's injury
Mhm.
was or could have been very emergent, but you handled it
Mhm.
extremely professional, considerate, loving, and you were ready.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
you didn't alarm us at all, and that was very very nice. But
Right.
you were obviously alarmed about looking back on it because of the injury,
Mhm.
and it don't happen with every birth. Most times it doesn't. It was actually came from having a birth in the hospital, forcing it.
Right.
And when I say forcing it, in the first birth, she still had a lip of the cervix, and she got an episiotomy because the doctor fought for it, and that was
Mhm.
not necessary. And that tore
Right.
her cervix, and it tore her in other places on the first go. And then that
Mhm.
clearly is what happened for the second injury.
Right.
So over
Right.
surgical, over intervention into the process had
Mhm.
collateral damage. And that was
Mhm. Mhm.
it was kind of sketchy, but we're grateful everything turned out totally fine. And we look forward
Mhm.
to
Mhm.
rebuilding her, and the recovery process, and it does take time too, especially on one of those.
Mhm.
And we want to prepare for, if we want to have another child, we want to be prepared for that. If not, then we want to give her the best life and health, and give our children the best we can. And
Mhm.
I still take a lot of what you taught me through that process, because working with women, it's different, and I can use your data that you give
Mhm.
me on a continual basis.
Mhm.
And I think
Mhm.
everybody from their own aspects need to know their self and document and be data driven, and preconceive nutritionally before you get into that. And I say that because people get pregnant and like, oh, it's time to get my life in order. And like you
Right.
said, that's
Right.
that's too late, really.
Yeah.
And I mean, you can do a lot in the first trimester, but it's just too late. And
You can. Yeah.
yeah, well, I really appreciate you coming on here. I'm not gonna keep you any longer. We both got children waiting on us, so thank you
Yep.
for coming on. And I would love to have you on again, and we can talk about in deeper detail.
Sure.
But I really want to share this with everybody, and your story, and your my experience with you. And I'd really want to have two more children. I would love that. Now I don't know how
I
the
would love that too.
yes, and we would love to have another home birth or two more home births. I would be game for twins,
Mhm.
and I know that's not,
Mhm. There you go.
but I would love it, because that's one of the greatest experiences you can ever go through with someone and enjoy.
Mhm.
And we it's funny, we look back and we're like, dang, it went too fast. 4 hours is just too fast of a
Uh-huh.
labor. And it
Yeah.
was a unique bonding experience for my wife and I. We grew from that, and even the recovery was blessing, because
Mhm.
we spent an hour together every
Mhm.
night working on that. So I really
Mhm.
appreciate you coming on, and I look forward to talking to you again. So thank you.
Yep. All right. Have a good evening. Thanks for
You
having
too.
me.
You're welcome.